Alright, you'll have to excuse me if my thoughts in this video are a little incoherent or seem a little jumbled, because I'm on a bit more of a time limit than usual, and time limits make me nervous. So, just in the meantime, let's just go right into Tomb Raider. I wasn't really... Obviously, we were preparing the verses this past weekend, so I got to revisit both of Angelina Jolie's movies. And with that, I wasn't expecting what this was. I had not realized that this is like an origin story. So that I had to kind of get used to that, but by the time you do get used to that, the movie's basically over. And what we have here is not necessarily a Lara Croft movie so much as a scared girl in over her head who ultimately becomes Lara Croft in like the last 5 minutes. So there's that. And we do immediately start off with these epilepsy-inducing editing in regards to the action scenes, where we have this sort of, I was getting broken arrow flashbacks, where she starts off in a ring, but she's getting her ass beat. And pretty much the entire first half hour or so of this movie is just her getting her ass beat. And so that was also not knowing that this was kind of an origin thing. That was kind of confusing. But then, what's even more confusing is that it wants, at the same time, to become an action movie as fast as possible, while also as slow as possible. By that, I of course mean, for action scenes, for the first 20 minutes or so, we have, it's basically Lara Croft in Premium Rush. Now, usually Premium Rush is by no means something I would complain about, but it really made me wonder what the hell movie I was watching. I don't even think it says the title at the beginning, so yeah, apart from the fact that Alicia Vikander is in this, and her name is Lara Croft, this could literally be anything. So, and on top of that, they basically have made her this, once again, this is pre-Tomb Raiding, so she's like this sort of goofy, she has this goofy, modernized kind of quality to her, where like Angelina kind of had that, you know, she had like the British accent, and she had the whole, you know, manner and all that, and there was just something very kind of sophisticated about her ass kicking. And here, she's just like, I guess, you don't really see a kind of hint of that at all. Not to say that, like, maybe Angelina's movies are, like, the absolute pinnacle of what this should be by any means, but, I mean, just as a reference point, it just feels so kind of off, and I understand if that's, could be an appeal, and that could be, like, you know, the pitch, more or less, was, we're gonna take it in a totally different direction, because we've already been there, let's try this thing. But this thing, kind of doesn't work from the get-go, and it's there's also that particular moment when she kind of puts on the helmet and they're talking about her job, and she says, "Do you think I wear this for fun?" And there's like an actual pause for laughter. It's like, of all movies, I'm not sure I expected Tomb Raider to have a moment where there's pause for laughter, especially not in the first 5 minutes. So but then once it gets going, we do kind of have our first big action scene after the whole Premium Rush thing, where it's like a chase thing, and it's like kind of this crowded kind of Mission Impossible setting, where she has to run through crowds, and she like swings off a hook and all that. And it's an okay action scene until you remember what the stakes of it are, where we are so kind of pokey in regards to getting to where we're going to go. We're about 20 minutes in now, and we have our first kind of real action scene that's not something that feels shoehorned in just because, like the biking thing, which really doesn't amount to anything. It's not like she, as I recall, doesn't use a bike later or anything, so, but the problem is with this chase scene is that the only reason we have this chase scene is because some two-bit muggers stole her bag. And that's it. Like, we're still not even off the jumping point yet. It's still like, we've gotten 2 action scenes now, and it's really hard to get, you know, swept up in them or invested in them, because it's like they're just dicking around right now. Until we finally get to what we're supposed to even be about, or what's going to change her character into who we know Lara Croft to be. But, like I said, the movie never really even comes to that. So we do have the stuff with the memories of her father. And it's like, maybe this is supposed to, we'll get some kind of emotion here, and then we'll be able to feel for her, and then once we feel for her, then we'll be able to go on. Regardless of how big of, like, this big action movie type thing it is, still, caring about her is going to add something nice, if we can. So we get the footage of her and her dad very briefly, but then it's the thing where we know it's only put in there just to cut off this scene, because it's the thing where she sees somebody she thinks is her dad, and she's distracted, and she just stares for a long-ass time not looking at the road, and we're not worried about, her emotional well-being. We're not worried about whether or not she thinks that's her dad or not. No, we're just watching saying, she's gonna run into something, she's gonna run into something. Just, would you fucking hurry this scene up? Because we know what's already coming. And then, to talk about how emotional it gets in regards to her dad, the next time she thinks about her dad, it's the same footage that we see. It's the same scene. Now, yeah, maybe that has a little bit of something to do with the fact that it's like the last memory of her dad before he disappears, and maybe that's why it's the one she keeps going back to. But honestly, I saw it and just thought, well, that feels cheap. It feels like they just wanted to reuse the same footage because they had nothing else to do. Despite the fact that we see other footage of him later in other memories, but it matters then. It matters as much then about as it does now, which is not that much. And it's the old cliche to where, like, she finds his old stuff, she finds a video of him, and he's saying, you can find this through these clues and all that. And it's this age-old thing. It goes. One of the first things that comes to mind is the Amazing Spider-Man movies went through this, and it just all feels like retreaded territory, but not even like Tomb Raider treaded territory. It feels like all the treaded territory of other shit, other less interesting shit. That this just, yeah, it's really, I kept giving it the benefit of the doubt, like maybe eventually it'll find its footing. But it just kind of kept going the exact route that it was, regardless of how much her surroundings change. Because the problem with this is that when we go on, is her characterization really is not strong enough to cover for, like, the non-action scenes. And even the action scenes, like I said, are barely holding on, but when it's a non-action scene, it's like, it doesn't feel like we're building to anything, it doesn't feel like, there's some kind of character arc, it doesn't feel like there's hardly a story moving. It's just like, and you would think, oh, it's just a bridge for action scenes. Really good action movies have done that before, but the problem is that there's probably a lot less action in this movie than you might be thinking. There certainly was less than I was thinking. And so it just feels like there's this whole stretch of just kind of the same shit. And that's populated by a whole bunch of weirdly familiar faces that you would probably never expect to see in this, like Kristen Scott Thomas or Dara Jacobi or Nick Frost, kind of. Nick Frost does have a very amusing scene where he's the pawn shop guy and he does the whole, I'm not flirting, I'm just naturally charismatic. Or when she tells the story of her father and he's like, oh, I've heard that dead dad shit before. It's like, so the Nick Frost scenes are nice, but and Dominic West plays her dad, who's surprisingly good, given what he has to deal with. And then our villain is Walton Goggins, which I know a lot of people were excited about. I know a few Walton Goggins fans who were really excited about this. And me as well, but, and you kind of want him, he's one of those actors where, yeah, he can be typecast, but at the same time, he's so good at what he does, you want him to be Gogginsy with his parts, but here, he's really not given any meat whatsoever, despite the fact that he's playing the villain. He mostly, he does get to do some villainy things, like, he gets to kill a few people, he does more than some shitty villains I've done in the past, but with it being played by Goggins, you just really expect this character to just kind of really go off, and he just kind of doesn't. He's just kind of there, just kind of looking over things, and will occasionally shoot a helpless person. And it's like, yeah, they just really could have done so much more with that, especially with the casting angle. And then it gets to a point to where it becomes very her abilities become very confusing, because we have that whole beginning, but then suddenly, in any given situation, she can just suddenly do things, and she's suddenly good at what she does, and so it's like, you have this constant question of, okay, does she suck, or is she good or is she good at what she does? Because it's like 1 minute she can't fight some random person in a ring, but then like the second she has to fight somebody, she's perfected the headlock that almost knocked her out at the beginning of the movie, despite the fact that we never see her practicing this shit. We just see her getting her ass beat. So it's like, the idea is like, maybe adrenaline trained her, because there's not a whole lot to the whole training here. She just kind of, it's like when she's forced into the situation, then suddenly she can do it. And when I say being trained by adrenaline rushes, basically, like suddenly that makes her able to do it, a lot more boring than that sounds, unfortunately. Like, a lot more lazy than that sounds, sadly. It just felt more like, oh, well, she needs to get out of this scene, and, oh, we're in these jungle scenes now. Might as well make her Lara Croft now. There's no build-up to her being the scared girl in over her head to what I guess is supposed to be Lara Croft. Like I said, even when the movie ends, it still doesn't feel like the transition has fully been made, which is a huge problem. And they're obviously setting up, like, a sequel here, or a franchise, or whatever they want. Good luck to them. I'm not totally sure if that'll happen, but I guess they were really counting on that in regards to how they've characterized her in this, because, like I said, it just feels like we're really getting blue-balled with this character. And it's like, just, you keep, yeah, they keep teasing like it's gonna be, but then it just kind of goes back and forth, like, either she doesn't know what she's doing, and she's just, you know, a scared person out of her element, or she's this total badass, or whatever. The movie has no idea all the way up to the end, and it just depends on the scene, I guess, which decision they're going to make for her. Because you never feel like the character herself is making a decision, so it's all the script moving, so it's, yeah, there's a lot of problems, and by the time it gets to the end, it's like, to be fair, to their credit, yes, a tomb is raided. So, at least they have that, but the problem is by the time we actually raid the tomb, it's very much like, not just the other Tomb Raider movies, but also like National Treasure, The Mummy, all these things. There's a point in time where she's like, I want to go on an adventure, that's why I'm doing this. And it's like, she comes off less like a Tomb Raider, more like a Goonie. And it's like, not that there's anything wrong with being a Goonie, but I mean, when you're comparing it to who she's supposed to be, yeah, it feels like we're not quite in the right place here. So, just underwhelming all the way through from beginning to end. And I'm not totally and completely crazy about the Angelina movies. I'm really not. It's just, but they feel like they're so, there's like something to be admired now when you go back to those, and they just begin, and she's already like a certified ass kicker, and we can just go right into it. There's something so much more fun about that, instead of taking the kind of slogging through her coming to terms with shit and becoming this person, even though, like I said, it feels like we barely get there, if at all. So, yeah, if you were looking forward to this, I have no idea if you're going to be let down or not. So that's that. Yeah, as somebody with not too many expectations other than just be a good action movie, I'm incredibly underwhelmed by it, so that's kind of a bummer. And I want to root for Alicia Vikander, too, because I guess there's the trend now. You gotta get a recent Best Supporting Actress Oscar winner to play Lara Croft, so, and she continues that, so, it's hard to tell. Her and Fassbender really want to try out this franchise thing, and I don't know if they really have that power or not, but yeah, and like I said, there's a likability that she has here, but it just really does not fit the character at all in a way that brings true, so I had a lot of trouble buying that from her, so yeah, I can only say the word underwhelming so many times, so that's what that is, so we can move on now. The next movie is going to be Annihilation, of course, and obviously we had a bit of this movie's going through kind of a problem in regards to its release. Obviously, I just saw it after a couple of weeks of release already. But the whole it's being released in Netflix in other countries thing. And yeah, that is kind of a bummer in regards to this type of movie, like of all movies, to get that treatment does seem a little off. Because it's definitely, well, go way back, way back being like a few years. I was thinking back to like Mike Cahill's movies, like Another Earth and I Origins and stuff like that, where it was like this really kind of thought-provoking sci-fi stuff, but it was also like very modest. Like kind of they were really working on really low budgets, but they were able to still kind of create these worlds and this whole atmosphere kind of in general, without having to necessarily do a whole lot in regards to like production, I suppose. But it had all those ideas in there, and that's what really made those movies fascinating. And I was kind of imagining we were going to get something akin to that, mixed with that kind of bizarre, ambiguous, but also really fascinating and mesmerizing nature of like Under the Skin. Yeah, that's the best parts of this movie are basically what that is. It's a combination of those two things. But the thing I was a bit worried about was in regards to the book. So, obviously the book is told entirely from her perspective and, like, inside her head, so I was wondering how that was going to translate. And how we've got stuff like when she, in the book, when she thinks she's been, like, she thinks the spores are, like, altering what's in her mind, and just stuff like that, and it's like, how is that going to translate on the screen without some kind of distracting voiceover or like way too much exposition or something. And yeah, there's certainly things that really work in this movie. As you've probably heard, it's getting like rave reviews from everywhere. Like the whole kind of feel in general once they get there, and it's that whole when they lose time, and there's like days that pass that just they don't even remember. They don't even remember setting up camp or anything, or getting to where they are in particular. But and so that seems like it opens the door to explore a lot of fascinating material. But then there's also some of the imagery, like there's the tree-like things that like grow out of the ground, but when they grow out of the ground, they are like in a human form. Or there's those two animals with like flower antlers or whatever, and they like run and jump in unison, which kind of brings about the whole idea that it just gives you a kind of weird vibe, but kind of in a good way, and acts as a bit of foreshadowing as well. But then, it really, yes. So going on, I didn't even mention Alec Garland's name yet. So obviously, he's been writing since, 28 Days Later and The Beach, Sunshine, but then he went and wrote and directed Ex Machina and really showed what he could do, and of course, I'm a big fan of Ex Machina. So, going into this, I was confident that he would do this justice, and he really does do well in regards to bringing this world to the screen, but I do have some problems, and I know that's a difficult thing to say, especially with this being on the internet, but let me explain myself before you get all angry. Starting with, I do think what Portman does is some really good stuff, how she's definitely at her best here, the way she has to react to what's happening, big or small, and a lot of that she's able to, like I was talking about, how are we going to do the book's whole perspective is from her, and she conveys that well enough to where she doesn't really have to say a whole lot for us to kind of imagine what exactly is going through her head. Obviously, they do a lot of flashbacks to handle that, but for the most part, that's good. But the other actresses, we've got people who have been really great in many other movies, like Jennifer Jason Leigh or Tessa Thompson. Gina Rodriguez is here as well. I do think, while they're fine, their exchanges in this movie, which should be really crucial to what's going on, are kind of... they just don't really ring true. I don't know if it's some combination between the dialogue and just the kind of... I suppose they don't have to, like, really... there aren't roles that require a shitload of, like, acting. But it just seems like there's something missing here when they're all kind of interacting once they're inside the shimmer. And Gina Rodriguez in particular, I I don't know. I'm sure she's great on that show, whichever one she's on, but here it's like her character ultimately has a particular turn, and it's kind of like she comes off more like a kid that's trying to come off big and bad, and it's like I said, a lot of these supporting performances sadly just really don't ring true at all. So it kind of has to ultimately become the Portman show, which it will inevitably get to a certain point anyway. But another thing that was kind of putting me off in regards to really getting, swallowed up by this world is the choice in music. And that's even before they're in the show. Like, when she's at home and there's, like, not that I dislike Crosby, Stills, and Nash. I don't want to get that vibe at all. But just something didn't feel right in regards to this. And the whole acoustic guitar thing that kept going on throughout. There was really... It just really did not seem like it fit the world at all. I felt like there either needed to be something a lot more subtly sinister, or no music at all. Like the kind of music we end up getting, or the score we get in like the last 20 minutes. Obviously not as like, big and loud, but I mean something just very kind of, like I said, low and kind of sinister throughout. It just really kind of, I found it confusing more than anything else, some of the music that would show up, but, so there's that. But then there's also the framing device. I don't know how much that works, because, obviously, once again, with the book, it kind of felt like we were just there, and obviously, once again, being in her head, the only way we really got the flashbacks is if she would just kind of mention them, or it related to something that she saw or whatever. But, or kind of gave, like, an emotional drive to do the things that she does or makes the decisions that she does. But here we've got this with her being, like, interviewed by Benedict Wong, and we keep cutting back to this. And that's kind of what I really felt would have really, really made this work is, and I do understand where, we have to know the stuff about her husband and all that stuff. But it really feels like, with the whole setup, with the whole setting of this, that it would have just been significantly more effective if we never really kind of cut to anything else, if it felt like we were actually just stuck in here with them, and there was hardly an outside world to remember or reach out to. But so it's so jarring and just really makes interest wane when we'll be, like, right in this, and we'll be in this really bizarre world, and it's like, you don't really know what, it's like a dream world. You basically don't know what can just materialize, from anything, or what it's going to look like around the corner, and we just keep getting these cuts back to reality, or what was once her reality. The whole affair thing, just a lot of it, I don't know. I'm racking my brain to figure out what would make him want to kind of bloat this setup with that kind of stuff, that really could serve its purpose just being mentioned in passing or whatever. But we have whole scenes devoted to it that take us out of this particular world, and it's really, yeah, it's just really not meshing well, because then it's like, and you can tell there's a significant difference. Maybe that's a little bit of the point. The significant difference between what the outside world is like and what this world is like. But I mean, it's not really jarring in a good way. It's like, and you kind of have to get back, and it doesn't grab you enough after we do that you kind of have to settle back into the world. It's not like you can take that high you were on and then find it again immediately once we've been in the real world again, talking about her banging some dude or whatever. So that's really unfortunate. And then there's this whole, I hate getting into this too much, but unfortunately when it comes to discussion of this movie, this is one of those movies that comes with a particular territory. And that is, yeah, we are at this stage right now where sci-fi movies like this, that try to be really thought-provoking, they don't make a shitload of money, which I think has a lot to do with the whole Netflix thing. But then, and how apparently their theater count obviously got really cut down, and it's only just now getting close to me like it did this week. And it wasn't even at this theater, I had to go down to the other one. And so there's this thing where it's like, how mainstream audiences treat a movie like this. And it gets, and well, that's truth to that for sure. This also comes with the territory of the mainstream audiences are stupid crowd, and I'm a big smart person because I like movies like Annihilation and I go see them, and it really gives kind of there's a taintedness to the discussion of it when that seems to be a big portion of it if you hang out in the wrong circles. And yeah, that becomes very prominent when movies like this are released. But the reason I bring this up is because it's being built up as this movie that's like way too smart for dumb people, or whatever it is people like that want to say. The teenagers in the audience saying, you know, I'm so much smarter than the older people in this crowd because I get this movie and they're not into it. The problem with this, though, is that this movie has its own psychologist and psycho scene. Actually, it has many of those. When I was talking about she's being interviewed by Benedict Wong, yeah, this is one of those movies where, while it does feel, you know, maybe it's on the verge of being smarter than the, you know, it's in that Arrival vibe, is what it is. But the thing that I don't remember Arrival having that this movie does is it's like every time something, you know, really weird or unique to this world happens, there's a cut back to that framing device so that Natalie Portman and Benedict Wong can explain to us what we just saw. And they even do that after the big, you know... Obviously, in the last 20 minutes, this movie just goes totally off. And it's obviously easily the movie's best moments. When it abandons the dialogue, it abandons all the explaining, and just goes fucking crazy. And it's like... And yeah, I am pretty sure the walls were going to come down at some point. Because the sound is just so insane. And you watch all of this happen, and then they just absolutely have to punctuate it yet again. It's like, can you imagine if the movie ended there, and without cutting back to anything else? But then we have to Benedict Wong say, oh my god, it was this. And she's, you know, like, basically confirming, oh yeah, that's what that was. And then, okay. So, it's like, okay, so what I'm saying is people want to build it up that it's this really, really smart thing that's so above the other sci-fi movies, but it's like, I feel like, yes, that movie is in there, but there's just so much you could shave off this movie to really make it so. To really make it more ambiguous. And there's obviously there's the whole, it's the trilogy of books thing, which I think, there's the separate ones, obviously, but there's also Area X, which is just the combination of all of them. And so, obviously, there's more to be had here, but that's also kind of like, if they want to go in that direction, I don't know if he has any plans to do that or not, or if he's financially able to, but, yeah, I would think there's just so much, well, there's too much room, is what I'm trying to say. And there's really a lot you can take out of this to really make it something that's significantly more thought-provoking. It feels a lot more like the dialogue is doing some of the thinking for us, which really takes away from it. I do feel like, once again, if it was something more like Under the Skin, which it will certainly give you that vibe for sure, but to where it just is, and there's no real particular framing device or explanation or whatever. And I'm not one of those people that's, like, constantly anti-exposition. Obviously, you know, shit needs to be explained, or it's just a mess. But this movie really would have benefited from just being exactly what it is, without, you know, hardly leaving the shimmer at all, if it even had to. And then, obviously, our climax as well. So, yeah, it just really feels like there's something here, but there's, like, so, like, the entire first hour... which is like half the movie. And then, once again, that device that keeps popping up that just, you know, lays it all out. It just really takes away from the impact this movie could have had. Which is unfortunate. I'm really surprised, honestly, that people are taking to it as much as they are, not just because it's smarter for other people or whatever, but, yeah, it's like I said, it just feels like all the ideas are there, but the execution is like really off, which sucks because I feel like the execution of Ex Machina is like almost perfect. Um, so that's, yeah, I feel like this is a step down from something like Ex Machina, but obviously, you know, whatever else Garland's going to do with his career is definitely something that has my attention, but unfortunately, I'm just not that big on this regard. So, sorry. Uh, um, so, yeah, but I do understand. I do think maybe possibly, not to, you know, think I know what people are thinking or anything like that, but something in my mind is suggesting that the last people being able to leave on the high that is the last 20 minutes of this movie are doing wonders for how they think of it overall. I could totally be wrong. I'm not going to say somebody's wrong for thinking the whole thing is great, but I feel like that 20 minutes is doing it a massive favor in regards to what people take away from it. So, yeah, it's certainly a book that's like this thick does not need to be a 2-hour movie. You can tell where the bloat is and what doesn't need to be here. So, yeah, that's what that is. That's... Alright, our next movie is going to be The Hurricane Heist. Yet another movie that's being shown around in the media as this hilariously bad thing, this over-the-top bad thing, this, oh my god, you have to see it just to see how bad it is kind of thing. And, yeah, obviously there is... You've got Rob Cohen, who did, like, the first Fast and the Furious. I think he did Triple X. He did that Alex Cross movie with Tyler Perry. So, you know you're in for something like that. And then it's like, this whole heist is going to be going down during this hurricane. The title could not be more blatant. So, your first thought is, like... And I kind of got this as I was watching it in the first half hour or so. It's like... People are building it up as this really, like, holy shit, how did this ever get made? And it's like, oh my god, this is just stupidity at its absolute finest. It's like, oh, it's the whole grab a beer with your friends kind of movie and make fun of it kind of thing. But it's like, I'm pretty sure we had this movie already with Hard Rain. And I don't know that this movie is all that much dumber than Hard Rain was. But, I mean, okay, yes, there are certainly things that, like, go overboard with this. Like, for instance, our main characters are the two brothers played by Toby Kebbell and Ryan Kwanten, who obviously, I think, Toby Kebbell obviously was Koba in the Planet of the Apes movies, but when he's himself, yeah. And then, obviously, I'm sure people love him on True Blood and all that, but I think Ryan Kwanten is absolutely awful in everything I've ever seen him in. So that in itself wasn't doing any favors, but it begins, and there are these two brothers who have these extremely exaggerated southern accents. It's embarrassing. And it's like, they start off that way as kids as well. It's like, I think I even heard a couple of people laughing. Like, the very first scene is this kid saying something, like, Dad, hurry! But it's this really exaggerated accent that just goes way beyond the ridiculous. And then, yeah, it was like, oh, okay, maybe when they're kids that'll wear off. But it's like, no, when they're adults, they keep it up the whole time. Props to their commitment, I suppose. Yeah, the thing that goes really kind of way off here is, like, remember the plot of Jaws the Revenge? Where, can you think of something dumber than the plot of Jaws the Revenge? Well, it turns out that, these two brothers, because their dad, remember Alexa Vega at the beginning of Twister, where she saw her dad? Well, these guys saw their dad killed in a hurricane, so now they basically... I don't remember if they actually say this or not, but they basically have a vendetta with hurricanes. So there's that. That's the starting point. That's the kind of emotional ground that we stand on that's going to propel where this movie goes and why these characters do what they do. So there's that. But then there's also another character who is Maggie Grace. I don't... the casting just right off is kind of like, I don't know. But, and she's obviously one of these characters that was created in a lab to be, like, as cool as she is kooky and quirky and all that shit. So much so that she's driving a semi truck and she's stuck in a traffic jam, and she's like, "Oh, I'll get us out of here." So she rams an innocent car who is here stuck in the traffic jam with her, and then backs out and drives her giant ass truck through these people's crops. And so it's like she tries to make it better for herself by saying, "Well, it's tobacco crops, and that's less cancer in the world." But it's like, yeah, but still, that's kind of these people's livelihood as well. So like, God knows how much money you just cost them. Now this family's going to be in the poorhouse. They might have to give up their kids. They might, go to homelessness, maybe commit suicide, something like that. So congratulations, Maggie Grace. You and your quirkiness have done this. And she just plays it up like, "Oh, I'm crazy. That's why I do this." So that's like one of our main characters as well, one of our heroes. And she's driving this truck with the person that ends up being our villain, who is Ralph Ineson, who is the guy in The Witch with the really cool voice, who was also in some of the Harry Potter movies. So he's like the one piece of dignity this movie has. And he is the villain, so it's like, oh, okay, maybe we can go with that. Maybe we'll be okay. And it's like hearing that awesome voice of his with this dumb dialogue is like, okay, there's something here. There's something intriguing here. And it's one of those cases where the dialogue is like, obviously it's, seems like a lost cause to even complain about dialogue in a movie like this, because obviously that's going to come with the territory, but it's like when he's revealed to be the guy at the very beginning, it's like, oh my god, you're in on it. And he actually says that, and it's like, these characters talk like they're watching a movie, not that they're in a movie. So that becomes a problem very quickly. And we just go into the same old stuff. Like, that's the thing is, the way movies like this thrive, if they're doing what they do well, is that they embrace their stupidity and it becomes this big, awesome thing. Like I was talking about with, like, seeing an actor, like, in a role like this, in a movie like this, where it's like you feel like there's just a tiny bit of dignity at its center, while everything else around it is completely stupid and over the top. So when you do that right, there is something to be had, but the problem is that this movie actually gets so far into the dumb territory that we do cross the line into the boring. Because we get the same old tired character types, where, sad music plays while they exchange their sad backstories. There's a moment where he's saying, like, his tragic backstory, and there's that one moment you can always pinpoint where she's kind of looking ahead, and it's like, oh god, he's telling his backstory, she's looking ahead. If she even looks at him once, a love story is brewing. Oh god, please don't look at him, please don't. And then she turns her head and it's like, great, a love story is officially brewing now. Mind you, it seemed like they wanted to go in that direction because they wanted to do every cliche possible thing, but really, the movie doesn't have time to even go in that direction. Like, they hint at it, they do their little stupid flirty thing, but then, like, the movie kind of gets in a big hurry to before that can even really continue to take place. So, honestly, you could commend it for that, but that also ends up making these portions of the movie even more pointless than they already are. So, that sucks. And so once you get to this point, it's like, it loses any kind of particular charm it could have had with this. Mind you, that was quite thin, but it could have had some charm to it, but they just abandon that, and then it becomes very boring once we're able to know every direction that it's going to go. Where it gets to the point to where, like, them being flirty and cool with each other is trying to guess the brands that are used in a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It's like, this is the point where the characters are likable or something, and we're supposed to care when shit's going down, but yeah. So it's like, and so you look at it as a big picture, and you think about the disaster movies we've had recently that really suck, like Into the Storm, or like San Andreas or something. And it's like, what were those movies missing? Well, I can tell you right up front, this proves that it wasn't a heist. Even throwing a heist into a movie like that will still make it suck. And it's, obviously, there's the old tired criticism. You can go on all day about how physics don't work here, and, like, a ceiling busts open and people fly out of it like it's a fucking plane. And yeah, movies like this, after a while, who really gives a fuck? Unless you're just looking for more things, to hate on it for. Because the thing here is that I can't really. Yeah, there's a lot of dumb things in this movie. Like I said, there are boring stuff like that. But it's like, because I'm on, like, this is on YouTube right now, I'm not gonna, like, play up some artificial rage or something that just takes a really easy target and is like just picks it absolutely apart and like just says, "Oh my god, this is the worst thing I've ever had to sit through." But it's not even like that. It's way too minor to even do that. And it's over way, like, to the movie's credit, it goes by really fast. I didn't feel like I was sitting through some torture. It was just like, I get what they're trying for, but I don't care for this. And then suddenly it's over. It's like, well, okay then. Um, and it's like, the thing also here, the reason also I'm not completely throwing holy shit fit over it, like I would say a Sharknado movie, is because even though that's the way people are playing this movie up, I don't think this is one of those movies that was made as the, hey, let's just see how bad we can make it and people will watch it ironically and it'll be great or whatever and we can be as lazy as possible. While the effects are shitty enough that it does look like it could be in the Sharknado universe, it does kind of feel like that somebody in the making of this movie probably thought they were making something worthwhile. Like, they actually thought, the heist during the hurricane was a legitimately good idea for a movie. With a better execution, maybe, possibly it could be, or at least in the charming, dumb way. So I don't really get that kind of vibe from this, which makes it better. Makes it easier to get through. But it still, though, just really doesn't work. The characters are idiotic and unwatchable. And it's way too... Even with something that seems so outlandish as this, it still seems like it's going through motions. And, like, we have seen this before, and it's like, it's just trying to be this kind of overly stupid version of movies we would see, like, in the 90s or something. The one I always fall back to is Black Dog with Patrick Swayze. It's like that, just throw a hurricane into it. And it's not really... Yeah. So, and maybe with better effects, honestly. Like, if it was, like, if we had, like, Twister-style effects, maybe we'd possibly have something. But, it just looks way too cheap and just, like, this really throwaway thing. So it's like, yeah, people are building it up now as, like, this, oh my god, I can't believe this exists thing. But it'll be out of everybody's minds in a week or so. So, it's already been out for, like, a week or so. So, it's probably already gone for most people, and... yeah, there's really nothing beyond that. So, yeah. And our last movie, finally saw Gringo. I actually saw it Monday, so hopefully my memory's not too vague. So what we have here is that Nash Edgerton, Joel Edgerton's brother, who's been a stuntman for a while, and I believe he directed, or if not, they all worked on it, The Square, which was not the movie that was just nominated for a language film with Elizabeth Moss, nor was it the documentary that was nominated a few years ago. It was a crime movie from like 2009 or 8, I want to say. Just this really small, kind of forgettable thing. But like I said, there's clearly talent in this whole family. So anything with the Edgerton name on it, I'm going to check out. And obviously Joel stars in it along with Charlize, and our main star is David Oyelowo. And the thing that immediately stood out to me was that I love how much of a change of pace this is for David Oyelowo, because we've obviously... there's been a kind of a line of movies he's had here with, like, Selma and A United Kingdom and Queen of Copway, and it's like... I just really want to see him do something to where he just really gets to go for... Even he was good in Selma, but obviously it felt like a bit of a watered-down Martin Luther King, especially since they couldn't use his actual speeches. So it's like, I know there's something in this dude. I kind of liked him as the villainous scientist in Rise of the Planet of the Apes. So it's like, I know there's something just itching to break out of this guy. And this movie is a really good start of letting him do that. He's got... because it's this kind of big sort of comedy. And it's like one of the opening scenes is him driving down the road singing Will Smith in the car. And it's like, just immediately you're like, yes, this is a version of him I want to see, because we've been seeing him in these very kind of serious roles, and good as he is in them, there's still something that feels like he's a bit confined. It's like, I just want to see him just burst out like this. And once again, this is a good start. And he's obviously surrounded, like I said, by a lot of talent. There's Edgerton, who is his boss, who is this really kind of sleazy type, the guy that basically bangs everything and will kind of cheat and lie his way around everything. Has this whole kind of orchestration about everything that gets him. Yeah, he's one of those guys. And then Charlize Theron is also kind of one of his superiors. She's supposed to be like this sort of the same ruthless type. But the thing about the Edgerton and Theron characters is they almost feel a little too over the top sleazy boss like. And there's like their douchiness is like completely off the charts, but in a way that doesn't exactly make you want to hate them or anything. It's just like you can kind of see where they saw what was on the page and did their best to bring that to life, but it feels very artificial. And then more so later when they give Charlize like this vulnerable moment from out of nowhere when she's sitting in a car watching something take place, which doesn't really come back in her character for a while, if at all. Maybe at the very end. So, yeah, but in regards to that, and there's also, obviously, there's a lot going on this way. The basic plot is that they're basically trying to put marijuana into a pill form, and this is about to, like, totally blow up, but there's also, like, crime bosses that come in. There's, like, shady deals. Then there's the whole, Oyelowo figures out that this deal is basically going to get him out of a job. He's just going to be thrown away by the company, so he decides to kidnap himself for a ransom until he's ultimately actually kidnapped. And it's this whole kind of web of things going on. And yeah, like, sort of, not quite Lebowski territory. You think that with the whole kidnapping himself thing, but it's trying to be somewhere in that area, and you can get a sense of that, but it never quite feels like it, like, totally takes off. But there's still, you know, some fun to be had here. But it does eventually, inevitably feel all over the place. And there are some characters that just kind of come and go, and you start to really wonder what their real purpose is, or if it's just kind of dragging it out a little bit. Amanda Seyfried and her dude, like, she serves a purpose for a little bit, but then, like, every time they come back, you're like, is this really necessary? Are they really that crucial? And, yeah, but once again, though, it's especially fun to watch De Oyelowo play this type of character in this type of movie, where he's got this great comedy scream, for starters, and then he has this way of being able to go back and forth between a bit of kind of, there's a bit of a smugness about him, but he's also the one that's always kind of walked all over, where he's kind of like, we get to see these sides of him kind of go back and forth between what situation he's in, where he's trying to be one type, but obviously, ultimately, at heart, he's the other. But there are moments that come out, like when he's doing the phone call to Edgerton and faking his, you know, being tortured or whatever, and he just has that kind of, like, smug, yeah, I'm getting away with this look. And it's like, it really gives the character some interesting dimensions. To watch how he reacts to all the different scenarios he's put through, because there are plenty of different ones. And once again, there is, the dialogue is a bit, the dialogue might be a little in love with itself, but for the most part it's fine, like the, how he actually has to call out that there's so many animal analogies throughout the movie. It's like this running joke. But Tandy Newton's particular monologue about the invisible gorilla, while that's the point where we're kind of getting overboard with animal analogies, actually still kind of works in context. So yeah, it does manage to break through some of that, but also there is the introduction of Sharlto Copley's character, who is Edgerton's brother, who is basically sent to save Oyelowo from his, well, would have been his hostage takers, but now are actually his hostage takers. It's a whole thing. And I really liked what he was doing here, because he really does, when the movie is kind of starting to wane a little bit, he's the one that really brings the life back into it. And as much as I loved him in District 9, he's one of those actors now that I'm a little bit wary of sometimes because they've kind of seemed to put him in one place in regards to what his roles are. Like, ever since he did the A-Team, and he played that really loud, over-the-top character, it's like that's how everybody casts him now. Like, he was like the over-the-top psycho in Elysium. He was the many over-the-top psychos in Hardcore Henry, Free Fire, and it's like, it just kind of feels like the same thing from him. And I don't necessarily put that on him, but it's like, he's very typecast at this point. And here, I like that he was able to really bring life back into the movie, but not be too over-the-top like he has been before. Um, and there's a lot of laughs. There is comedy to be had, but there's also the way that he's one of those characters that can flip flop on a whim, and usually that would be annoying. But it's like we kind of know his motivations pretty early on, and know that basically he goes where the money is. So this is going to make him go potentially in one direction, but then another, and kind of a back and forth thing, and we never quite know what side he's going to land on until we finally reach a point, and that makes it really fun to watch. The fact that he's that unpredictable of a character, and we're not quite sure which decision he's going to make depending on what's motivating him, or if his principles will stay the same or not. So that makes it a little exciting, but overall, as a comedy, obviously I've been saying comedy as opposed to like, these particular scenes are hilarious and all that. While it is consistent as a comedy, and there are moments that kind of make you kind of do that laugh, I wouldn't call it, it's not particularly laugh out loud funny, but it is funny, if that makes any sense. And yeah, and it does kind of feel like, by the time it gets to the climax, it does kind of feel a bit watered down again. The movie, its problem is that despite all this going on, the movie would benefit from being crazier than it is. Like, if this movie, you just keep waiting for this movie to like totally, completely go off the map and go crazy, and it feels like the seeds for that are like right there, but they never really take off like that. So it does kind of leave you wanting more and wishing you had gotten more out of it. Yeah, like I said, I saw it Monday, so right now it's just like, it's becoming more and more of a vague memory, though more or less a fond one, I guess, but yeah, that's what it is. So hopefully the next time they team up together, the Edgerton brothers, we get something that's a bit more hard-hitting and memorable, and more kind of, totally outlandish. Something, like when Joel first directed with The Gift and made that kind of impact. So hopefully we get something like that from Nash before too long. He's really good with action, which you would expect from a stuntman, so there is that. But yes, so that's what we have here. I keep looking up what next week is, and then I can never remember what it is. But I know, like, over the next few weeks, there's like Ready Player One and A Quiet Place and all that stuff. So yeah, you'll have the giant Bond video and all that. The Tomb Raider video, all that stuff. So the other Tomb Raiders. So yes. So that's yes. That's it.